Those of you who have been into the Atari emulation scene at one time or another have perhaps encountered what appears to be a strange Activision game titled Venetian Blinds. The quote-unquote game is quite literally a window blind simulator. You can raise them up or let them down, but that's really all. There's no win condition anywhere to be found, and one has to wonder why Activision would make a game which one could play in real life at any shady rundown and possibly haunted Super 8 motel. So why did Activision make this bizarre demo, and whatever happened to it? The story is actually more interesting than you might expect. Before Nintendo was threatening third-party developers into submission, Atari was the proverbial bully of the gaming industry, and in a bit of irony, because of their bullying tactics, they ended up creating what some would call the first third-party developer, Activision. Certain programmers at Atari had become frustrated with their business model. No matter how well the games which they developed sold, they received no royalties or bonuses for their work. Perhaps more importantly from the perspective of an artist, Atari denied them any recognition for their work, be it in the game itself or simply printed on the cartridge label. Tensions between Atari's higher-ups and the handful of disgruntled devs came to a head in 1979, when programmers Alan Miller, Bob Whitehead, Larry Kaplan, and David Crane met with Ray Kassar, Atari's CEO of the time. The four of them had already established themselves quite well through titles such as Outlaw, Air Sea Battle, Surround, which is a predecessor to the classic game Snake, and Video Chess, which would become a surprisingly important game as we go forward. The meeting did not go well, Kassar failing to see the four as little more than assembly line workers. Kaplan would later recall that during the meeting, Kassar compared the four to towel designers and said that, quote, anyone can do a cartridge. The fallout from the meeting led to three of the four leaving Atari. Crane, Whitehead, and Miller left to found Activision in October of that year, along with Richard Muchmore, a venture capitalist, and a former music industry executive named Jim Levy, who would be the company's CEO. Levy's foundation in the music industry heavily influenced the way in which he treated his game designers, putting a heavy emphasis on recognizing the devs, so far as to including short biographies on them within their game's manual. This kind of model is exactly what the four who originally met with Kassar wanted, and it wasn't long before Kaplan too left Atari for a spot at Activision. Despite Kassar's feelings that the four were dispensable at the time of their meeting, that didn't stop Atari from pressing legal action against the upstart company, likely due in no small part to the four programmers making up more than 50% of cartridge sales from Atari before their departure. Which leads us more or less into the Venetian Blinds demo. Though it may seem primitive and initially unimpressive to the modern gamer, the Atari title Video Chess was something of a technical marvel for the 2600. In fact, it was initially believed that such a complex game would have been completely impossible at the time. The main reason, though, wasn't actually the game's logic. It was the Atari's limited graphical capability, as it was only able to display a maximum of 6 sprites in a row, when chess needed 8. Whitehead, who co-led the programming on the title, was forced to develop a new technique to skirt this issue, which he would dub the Venetian Blinds technique. The Venetian Blinds technique doesn't in the most true sense solve the issue of the 8 concurrent sprites, but rather uses an algorithm that creates the illusion of 8 sprites via reusing sprites and vertical interlacing. Activision had never actually used this technique in any of their games, but Atari, who was still pretty salty over the creation of Activision, threatened to sue them for, quote, stealing the technique along with other so-called company secrets. Activision not being one to bend so easily, and having a bit of humor about the situation knowing they were not guilty of any wrongdoing, thought it would be funny to pull a prank on their former employers. David Crane, who would go on to create the massively popular and imitated Pitfall, took to programming the Venetian Blinds demo. The demo itself is exactly what the name implies, a simulation of Venetian blinds. The user can raise or lower the blinds by use of the joystick, and view a nicely rendered 2600 sunset, which itself was a technically impressive feat. When Atari's lawyers showed up and started questioning them about the supposedly stolen technique, Crane showed them the Venetian Blinds demo and asked, "Is this what you guys were referring to?" Atari apparently wasn't in a laughing mood or didn't get the joke, because they promptly took Activision to court. Activision, unfortunately for Atari, however, had the facts on their side, and Atari lost the lawsuit, allowing Activision to go on and become the most successful third-party developer on the console. So what's happened with Venetian Blinds since? Well, for starters, its sunset background was later reused in the Activision title Barnstorming by Steve Cartwright, the sunset actually becoming something of an Activision staple itself. It has also been included as something of a novelty on a range of classic game compilations. As for Bob Whitehead, the man who invented the actual Venetian Blinds technique, in 1984, having become disillusioned with Activision, he left the company he helped found, along with other co-founder Alan Miller, to create Accolade Games, purportedly named as such because it came alphabetically before Activision and therefore implied superiority. In a sad bit of irony though, Accolade was later bought up by Infogrames, which shortly after its acquisition of Accolade changed its name to Atari. At some point, Whitehead decided to leave Accolade so that he could, in his own words, give back to God and spend time with the fam. When asked about his feelings on the modern gaming industry, Whitehead has been quoted as saying that it's too dark and derivative for his tastes, and too narrowly defined by the mentality of 14-year-old males. And with that, I conclude my look at the Venetian Blinds demo. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.